Hey y'all, it's Allie and Calvin and Hannah, and we are here this week and we're going to be talking about anger. Anger is often expressed in songs. Last week, I know we were talking about hope, sometimes hope for the future, hope for something different. We found that a root emotion that can sometimes come along with that is anger at the present, anger about what isn't right. So we wanted to kind of put this in our own words, in our own context. If we look at a dictionary definition of anger, it's a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. We can think of synonyms like I'm indignant, or irritation, rage, displeasure, frustration, wrath, fury. All of these words are really big, negative, terrible words. And so we wanted to broaden that definition a little bit and put it into our own words. So how would y'all describe anger?
I would say that this is a good, definition. It covers the surface, but there's definitely some deeply rooted parts of anger that it doesn't cover. And I think a lot of the connotation on anger is negative. It's considered to be not good. It's often thought of as just bad. People don't often feel like they can express it. And I think that that's something that is kind of a stereotype within society, and also often in religious settings or at church. People don't feel like they can express anger, or they feel guilty for feeling angry. So I think that there's definitely ways to express anger in a healthy way, and understanding that is really important, and breaking down these norms and realizing that it's an emotion that we were given and we can use it for good.
Absolutely. So I want to talk more about how, or maybe a sensory definition and maybe a psychological understanding of anger. So, like, where do we feel anger in our bodies? And for me, it's either in my gut or it's in my face. And have you ever heard the expression, I saw red, or seeing red? So our liver, our gut, is responsible for processing our blood. And when you're angry, there's an excessive amount of heat in the gut and the liver, and that blood rushes to your head, and it can overwhelm the mental facilities. And so that's the reason why you sometimes hear the phrase, I was seeing red. And psychologically, anger is a call to action. And so it's represented in the word should. Like we say, I should do this, or you should stop doing that.
Yeah. So what are the different ways that y'all have seen people manage their anger?
I mean, basically there's only two ways that I'm aware of, how people deal with their anger. One is contain it, and then one is to express it. And I've seen healthy and unhealthy ways where people either contain it or express it. I think the important part is to develop a healthy way to contain your anger or express your anger.
For sure, yeah. Elaborating on that a little bit, I definitely think that you're right with the containing and the expressing part. I think that a lot of times there can be a healthy way to contain anger when you're containing it to process. I'm keeping this to myself while I figure out what's going on within me. And then maybe you would want to express it to someone you trust in a good, healthy way that is appropriate and not hurting anyone and not hurting yourself. And then I think there's also that unhealthy aspect of I'm containing this. I'm not really processing it. I'm just thinking about how upset I am. And that, I think, can build up sometimes. And you can end up exploding, or, which I would say is probably the unhealthy way of expressing your anger. Because often when we explode, or, you can think of another word for it, but basically just when you're uncontrolled expression of that emotion, you're not really thinking about how you're affecting others. You're not really thinking about how it's going to affect you and how you're going to feel about what you're doing later. So I definitely think that is something that is really important. You need to know, this is the way that I can contain my anger, that is going to help me. And this is the way that I can express it that's going to help me and others, So that's definitely very important as far as how I've seen people manage anger.
Yeah, to that, I feel like, so my background, I was a teacher. I taught elementary school. I did anything from pre-K to 6th grade. I was in the classroom for 5 years. I've done a lot of different activities with youth as well. So maybe you're in the same situation. You have younger siblings, you have youth groups that you're a part of. Maybe you volunteer with youth of any age. Maybe you're a parent and you have young children. I think that a very easy way of trying to control kids' emotions is to have them suppress their anger. We think that these tiny brains or these young people are going to understand that containing it means that at the appropriate time to express it or at the appropriate time to process it. But often the way that we communicate that is just that anger is bad, you shouldn't feel it, you need to get rid of it, and a lot of times that translates into suppression. They don't talk about it, they're not encouraged to think through it. A lot of us are verbal processors, we can't just mentally figure it out. We need to talk through it, we need people to model healthy ways of dealing with our anger, of expressing our frustration. I think that that's a really, really important aspect. So, Hannah, in preparing, you had mentioned kind of your background, how you were raised thinking of anger.
Right, yeah. I think that I can definitely relate to what you're saying. I think that through society, through maybe just the environment I was raised in, I did kind of get this negative idea about anger. And I thought of it as a bad thing, that I didn't want to, I didn't ever want to show that. I never wanted people to think I was angry because I thought it was a bad thing and I didn't want to upset anyone. So I definitely suppressed some anger, I think, because like you were saying, when you're a little younger or even as you get older, if you never learn how to do that properly, you can end up suppressing, containing it in an unhealthy way to where maybe it doesn't build up to the point of, exploding or yelling or something like that. For me, it just kind of, I think, could end up being something that stayed inside and hurt me, like with my emotional capacity or how I can relate to others and different things like that. Maybe like distancing myself from my emotions. And also, I think it can also end up building resentment about maybe a situation or even a person. So I think with that, you have to be really careful, and you should definitely express yourself, just process, and make sure you give yourself time to understand what's actually going on within you, and then start expressing that. But definitely don't suppress your anger in an unhealthy way, because I think that can be really detrimental to you especially, but also later it can affect others around you.
So Calvin, you had a lot of really good methods and resources that you wanted to share with us on coping or handling anger.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best things that I've ever done for processing big emotions is centering prayer, and it's a form of Christian meditation. Also things like creative journaling, things like getting out in nature. Maybe you go walk in a park, or you go fishing at a lake or a river. So these are things that are been helpful for me. Also, finding someone safe that can mentor me. Maybe it's a therapist or a counselor, maybe a pastor, a teacher. It could be a close friend or maybe even a parent. And finding a mentor to help you process big emotions. Another thing that's been helpful for me is reading books like Gary Rosenthal's Nonviolent Communication. He's got another one called Getting Past the Anger Between Us. Like, I'll give you an example of one of the tools that he provides in his book is to, one, state what you're feeling. I feel angry, and then say when you, and then provide very concrete example of the behavior. So, I feel very angry when you speak to me in that tone. And then follow it up with a positive action request. And so you're asking for them to do something, and you're not asking them not to So it might go like this. I feel angry when you speak to me using that tone, and I ask that in the future you provide feedback in writing. And so that's a very healthy tool. Another book that I think is very useful is Dealing with Difficult People. I'm not exactly sure who is the author, but I know it's a good book. So.
All right, yeah. Thank you, Calvin. I think a lot of those are really great for dealing with your anger, and I've definitely utilized some of them, and I think that they're very beneficial. In addition to that, I have kind of a tool that I use of just like reflecting internally, trying to figure out exactly how I'm feeling and kind of work through my thoughts. And even if I've been thinking about it, try to process it, I guess. And then I also try to look for different points of view, just try to look at it from a different side, or maybe think about it how someone else might think about it. And by extension of that, the individual people who may be involved in the situation, try to see it from their point of view or their perspective. And I know that you don't always want to do that, because especially if they're the ones you're irritated with.
So I think something really important about recognizing that you have an issue or have that it's hard for you to deal with some of our big emotions is thinking that you're the problem. Sometimes we identify with that emotion as if that is who we are. The importance of our language and talking about our emotions or how we feel, it's just as important to express it as it is in how we express it. If we start identifying as I am angry, it's very easy to jump to I'm an angry person, to feel that shame and that self-rejection of I don't like who I am. Because we want to remind you that this is not who you are. This is an emotion that you are feeling. It's an emotion that is human. God gave us the capacity to feel all of these big things, all of these ginormous emotions, and that we don't have to identify with that thing. We can be rooted in who we are in Christ, who we are in God, and identify this emotion and work through it and process through it, be able to label it, to point to it and see how it's affecting us, but that our language around the way that we discuss it, it's really important. And so, kind of going along with this, Calvin's going to share a prayer that we wrote, and it gives us some good language as a framework for how we can think through this and process it.
I allow myself to feel this feeling. I make time and save space for me to reflect before expressing it. I allow my body to feel this emotion fully. I am patient as it is being processed. I share my experience with the appropriate people at the appropriate time. I accept that this emotion does not define me. And I know that my true identity is rooted in Christ, in God.
So our prayer for you today, every day, is that you've been able to take away and see that you're not alone in some of the things that we've been sharing. The words to this prayer we're going to include in the description below. We would love for you to be able to take this into your daily practice, to use it as a positive self-talk, a positive way of processing through and connecting with God over your own self-reflection. We think that it's really important. It's very helpful to not ignore it, to not suppress it, to not explode, to utilize different tools to process through these emotions in the right way. So, we also don't want to leave you thinking that this is just negative. At the very beginning, we talked about, kind of society's stereotype of anger, and that it was very negative, that it was unhealthy, that it was, this big, bad, terrible thing, this monster inside of us, and, it's our responses that can be the monster. Calvin mentioned that sometimes this is a call to action, and if we show it through that frame of mind, in that light, and if we deal with it in the right ways, this is our call to change. This is that big emotion that we are feeling, that we are living with, because we know that something could be different. And so we encourage you to look at your emotions and look at your heart and see, where is this feeling coming from? What can I do with it? And we pray that it's constructive. We pray that you find people that you can share it with in a non-judgmental way, both with them and with your own heart. Open up to God. We love you, and we'll see you next week.